you may have noticed on the opening session part of our program, we have many dialogues for you today, courtesy of IG and Uri Financial Group. To continue this dialogue for our opening session, we have two distinguished guests, Dr. Anne Krueger and Dr. Victor Cha, who will both share brief keynote messages, followed by a special conversation between our speakers and award-winning columnist, Mr. William Pesek. Would you please join me again in a round of applause? Thank you very much. First, we are honored to hear from Dr. Anne Krueger, Senior Research Professor of Johns Hopkins University and Professor Emeritus of Stanford University. She was also former First Deputy Director, Managing Director of the IMF, and Senior Vice President of the World Bank. Would you please join me in welcoming Dr. Anne Krueger with a round of applause?
Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to be here. It's an honor to speak at this important occasion. Korea's economic progress continues to be the envy of the world. Not only has Korea's economic growth been remarkable, but Korea's economic policymakers have usually been adept at adjusting to adverse conditions with alacrity and wisdom, partly because of the influence and the importance of groups like IGE who help think about, formulate, and study policies and their effects. So it's an important occasion, both for the thinking about it, for understanding it, but also for actions about it. And I'm pleased to be here. The first thing to be said, of course, is that the current global situation is incredibly difficult for everyone. Worse, there is greater uncertainty than at any time, at least since the Second World War. There are questions as to how to adjust the demographic change. Most rich countries, and certainly Korea, are confronting declining birth rates and declining population growth rates. A second question concerns whether and how AI will affect these economies. These two issues alone would be quite enough to give major challenges to any set of policymakers anywhere, anytime. The global economy's success over the past centuries has been achieved in the context of rising populations, and there historically has been no period, certainly, in which things have been like they are now, and with prospects of population growth either stagnant or declining or indeed negative. AI is, of course, entirely new. Some think it will constitute a huge disruption to the way things are done, while others liken it more to automation, which was expected to be a major disruptor. The forecasts were that by 2020, we would have massive unemployment, automation would do everything, and many people would be out of a job. Of course, instead, automation has come about. We've had productivity growth, and things have had far less disruptive effects than were anticipated, although, of course, there were some. These two factors by themselves constitute important phenomena that will impact the course of all the economies in the world. But the third factor, and the one I'll focus on, leading to high uncertainty, is the economic policies of President Donald Trump and their likely impact on the US and the world economies. That uncertainty in itself is a huge negative. Related to that is the question of the likely trajectory of the American economy in the short run. Will inflationary pressures result from budget deficits and heightened tariffs at a time of close to full employment? Or will instead the American economy transition into stagnation and recession? The US policy shift since Trump took office in January this year is truly an economic earthquake of major proportions. Economic policies in his first term of office already constituted a landmark shift in US domestic and international economic policy, but they were not enough, or bad enough, I suppose I should say, to lead analysts to anticipate the abrupt and scorched earth nature of the beginning of his second term, and it has been very much that. Many of Trump's policies are likely to have harmful consequences for the US economy and its growth prospects. They include all kinds of things that you know about, and I have to skip over here for lack of time. I'm going to focus on trade policies just a little bit because they're most directly of concern to Korea, and because the actions have been so visible and so against the current of what U.S. economic policy was before. Of course, other countries have undertaken policy reform over the years, but mostly it's been for the better. And not only has it been for the better, but normally it's been gradual. It has not been that one day somebody wakened up and turned direction 180 degrees, which is almost what happened in the United States in January 20th last year. I was always proud of the United States because of what it did after World War II, and its leadership and its open policies on trade were part of what enabled the growth of everybody, including Korea, to do as successfully as it did over the first 75 years, really, after the Second World War. What's happening now is unfortunately a reversal of that. The World Economic Order was one in which we did have a rule of law under the World Trade Organization, and unfortunately, the president has done a great deal to undermine that, as you know, and we do have problems with it, and we need to do something about it, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But in the meantime, let me just say that the World Trade Organization did stand for the rule of law. It was successful in many ways. In fact, I wrote a paper about 20 years ago saying it was the most successful of the international organizations, given how much tariffs had fallen, how much trade had grown, how the world had grown in a result. And why that has all changed now, of course, is a subject of serious concern. It's clear that the WTO does need some reform. In particular, we need a subsidies code in which we agree on what is a reasonable way to spend to support business, as, for example, research and development, and what is an unreasonable way, as, for example, subsidizing a particular company. There's much that needs to be done on that score. I just dropped that without saying more at this stage, but it's certainly a key issue, I think, for those of us who want to get back to the healthy growth of the international economy. Now, Trump's protection, as you know, has covered everything. His first act in 2017 was to rescind the U.S. acceptance of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But, as you also know, what then happened was that the other countries that were signatory to the agreement formed their own partnership, minus the U.S. That sets a pattern that we might think about right now in terms of what can happen to the world economy and how indeed we might have a WTO -1, or if you think about it, maybe -2. But on the other hand, something the same line where the rest of the world picks up what the U.S. has dropped and makes the rest of the world more prosperous. It won't help the United States very much, if at all. It'll probably harm. But the United States then would have a choice of rejoining and adopting the earlier policies which were so successful, or going about what it's now doing and basically self-destructing. When Trump entered office only 9 months ago, it's hard to believe it's only that short a time, it seems much longer. But when he offered the second time, entered office, the average tariff in the United States on manufactured goods was under 3%. It is now, believe it or not, already 18% and rising. That's not the end of it. Unfortunately, that takes the United States from one of the most open economies in the world to one of the advanced economies with the highest tariffs. It's an unbelievable change in such a short time. There seems to be no clear objectives to Trump's tariff negotiations. In fact, they're contradictory. He wants higher tariffs. He also wants more foreign direct investment, as you, among others, know to your sorrow. But the trouble is that more foreign direct investment will lead larger trade deficits, by definition. Larger trade deficits are the opposite of what he wants. He wants, of course, more investment in the U.S. because he wants more good jobs, but then, of course, there are no people to fill those jobs, and he is not providing the education and training that might enable a way to get them. The policies are full of contradictions. They do not add up to any coherent strategy whatsoever. They're almost a dartboard at which every day he throws a dart, and it lands somewhere because he doesn't have very good aim, and he does whatever it says. And if you think of this as a dartboard economy at the moment in terms of policy, you may not be far from the truth, I hate to tell you, but that seems to be the way it is in terms of the random attack on this, the random change in that. Obviously, in the case of Hyundai in South Carolina, we have a case where all the policies have worked in opposite directions. It's not possible to know which way things are going in the U.S. because they aren't going in any direction. They're going back and forth. My analogy, which I like, is the driver in a car who sees a big obstacle coming up again, and he doesn't like it. He wants to avoid the trouble. So what does he do? He slams on the accelerator and the brake. And then what we don't know, or I certainly don't know, and I've asked a couple of engineers, if you slam the brake and the accelerator on full blast at the same time, does the car speed up, or does it stall, or does it flip over and turn, or what? We don't know, and I think that's exactly where the U.S. policy is going right now, because we don't know whether the accelerator or the brake or any other number of parts of the car will win. It is really an unfortunate situation in all regards. There are questions about the legality of Trump tariffs. They're clearly against the World Trade Organization, because the World Trade Organization agreement is that except for free trade agreements, if a country has a tariff on a particular good, the tariff will be the same for all countries. It will not be discrimination between countries. Trump is violating that, of course. That's true. But it's also violating the US Constitution, which says that only the Congress has the right to set tariffs. In the past, Congress has said, okay, we will exercise that right by letting the administration negotiate a trade agreement, and then we will have an up or down vote, meaning Congress can say yes or no, but they cannot amend it to change the agreed upon tariff or whatever it is for something. Obviously, at the moment, that is not working. It is in the courts. The lower courts have basically said that no, these tariffs are not legal, and they may be reversed. Unfortunately, even if that gets to the Supreme Court, and even if it's reversed, and they say that this is not like, the likelihood is that Trump will find another reason for imposing those same tariffs, which will take it through the courts again, and we will not be over with this very long, very sad story. It is unfortunate. I can only apologize for my country. I have no acquaintance even whom I know who says that what's going on makes any economic sense whatsoever. And anybody who has taken Economics 1 knows that one of the things that is just true by definition, and it's sort of like saying that there is a sun, because you can't say there isn't one, it's up there. The same is true of a trade deficit. It's the difference between a country's expenditures and its production, or its value of its income. That's what it is. And you can't change the trade deficit without changing one of those. And you can put all the tariffs you want to in the world. You may make trade smaller, but you will not trade, unless there's something changing expenditure or changing production, you will not change the deficit. It's a matter of arithmetic, nothing more, nothing less. What can be done? I'm hurrying because my time is short. I think the Comprehensive Partnership for Trade after TPP was struck down is a good model. Countries got together and they took, in that case, the TPP agreement, amended it a little bit to things they liked better, took out the things the US wanted, because why did they have to have those? And then they agreed for the other countries. Why not have the countries of the world who still want open trade do exactly the same thing? Take the WTO agreement, take a look at it, but very quickly, do not try to change the whole thing. Look at subsidies and those things later. Just get something going, get a dispute settlement mechanism going again, and do this all together. Sorry? Close to my mouth, I'll swallow it in a minute. Anyway, in the meantime, my advice, such as it is that the main thing countries need to do is keep their own macroeconomic stability firmly in place, including flexible exchange rates, because that helps balance shocks. Secondly, do nothing that will reduce the degree of competition businesses in your country face. I think one of the big mistakes that's made, and over again, is people think that they can protect their own economies without protecting the industries within them in ways that mean that those industries become quasi-monopolies or oligopolies. And certainly, since I think in the longer run, many sensible countries will come back to open trade if they're not going to stay there. They will come back and they will need the competition and so on. If there are tariffs in place, it is much harder to get rid of them than it is not to put them in the first place. Try to find means like better education, social support for those who are damaged, do other little things, I mean not so disruptive, that can be either kept up because they're good, or that can be taken away when they're no longer needed without trouble. If there is protection for any reason, I think it's absolutely essential that in the legislation or the decree or whatever it is that puts a tariff in place, there is also a terminal date. The tariff isn't effective for 2 years, and then we'll go down by 25% for 4 years. Making sure that that cannot be amended along the way, which unfortunately politicians will want to do, which is why I don't like it in the first place. But on the other hand, the danger, it seems to me right now, is that other countries, for good reason, seeing what the US has done, is trying to protect themselves. Politicians say, aha, my people aren't going to like it because they're going to be hurt. All that is true. But if then they do things that make the longer term outlook so much worse, they are doing things because of something that will hurt them as much as the United States is hurting itself right now. And the final thing to be said is that the United States is hurting itself right now. There's no doubt in my mind, and based on what I've learned over the years, that if the United States persists in these policies, what's going to happen over time is its growth rate will slow down. Not necessarily this year or next. There may be some investment in import substitution industries, but the growth rate will slow. And as it slows, what will happen is, of course, that other countries who maintain more open systems will grow more rapidly, and maybe it will be the Asian century, maybe it will be the East Asian century, who knows what it will be. But it will be some other group who do not do these foolish things, who then take the leadership. Finally, immigration. The United States has grown as rapidly as it has since COVID because we have been one of the countries that have had open immigration policy. As you know, Trump has been as irascible about that as about everything else. Again, if we keep on doing that, there's an interesting statistic that was put out by the Census Bureau, and this is under Trump, so I don't think it's particularly biased. If the United States were to cut off immigration so that it's no more than the lowest it's been in the past 10 years, in any year between now and 2035, given what we clearly know about what the people who are going to be in the workforce in 1935 are already alive, and given all that, we can calculate the U.S. labor force would be 33% smaller, 35%, sorry, smaller in 1935 or 2035 than it is now, simply on the basis of the demographics that already exist if Trump persists in his immigration policy. And we do not have the skilled workers, as many people, including the CEO of Hyundai and others have said, they just started in the United States. One thing Trump could have done instead would be to adopt training programs. He could have done other things that would have made sense and would have helped the whole world and the whole growth. We haven't done that. And so in the short run, at least, the outlook, I'm afraid, is maintain economic flexibility. Do not adopt this policies that get you in permanent trouble with monopoly, rigid organization, protecting everybody in place so that you cannot have a flexible economy. And having done that, just hope that pretty soon, if not sooner, the United States somehow or other goes back to its senses. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Dr. Krueger.